Hello all, Jace here. Today we're going to watch a video where Ben Shapiro takes on 25 Kamala Harris supporters on a variety of topics. It's an odd format. You guys have probably seen it before. The first topic is whether or not Kamala Harris's attempt to put DEI at the center of her policies is destructive. And let me say right off the jump, I mean, if you want to watch what Ben and these 25 people had to say, absolutely go watch the Jubilee video. I'm not just trying to take their content and put it on my channel. This is legitimately how I feel about what they discussed. So if you don't care what I think, you can stop watching right now. Go ahead and hop on over to the Jubilee video, watch it uninterrupted, and Godspeed.
First of all, we're standing on stolen indigenous Tongva land, right? This is.
Are you moving anytime soon?
Land? No, but
Why?
The fact of the matter is I'm born and raised California. We're talking about diversity, equity, innovation. We should.
So why don't we?
Absolutely should.
You could do it today, right now.
Great. We should, but that's not my point here. The point is you're saying that diversity, equity, inclusion is destructive.
Yes.
Right. So when we look at this country that is built off the backs of slavery and white supremacy, taking the lead, building the roots and foundations of everything that you know and believe today, it's ironic to see a Black and Indian woman who's rising up to the occasion against society, pushing them down. And this isn't just the fact that they're Black and Indian and a woman, it's the fact that
Can you give me an example of how society pushed Kamala Harris down, please?
The demographic of people is what I'm talking about.
Well, yeah, but you suggested that Kamala Harris is being pushed down by society.
I'm not suggesting that, no.
I mean...
Okay, first off, I hate this format. This speed run debate thing they got going. It's stupid. Half the time you'll see they vote each other off before Ben even gets to reply to their points. I just don't feel like this is really, I mean, it's an entertaining style, but it's not a very productive one. I don't think anything ever gets done, or at least this is the second one I've seen. I haven't seen anything productive come out of either of them. Second, nobody wearing that hat is going to be taken seriously ever. Third, even his buddies, even his woke friends voted him off quick on this one because they knew that crap was not going to work with Ben Shapiro. You're standing on stolen land. You're living in a country built on the backs of slaves. All of the standard woke talking points that get him snaps in his little woke poetry circles are not going to work against Ben Shapiro. All these other people realize that, and they get him out of the way quick. And for the record, not that it matters, it's anecdotal, but I am married happily to a Native American woman. I fully acknowledge the horrible treatment that the Native Americans received when the settlers came over and during the forming of the country as it is today. I fully acknowledge that. I fully acknowledge that slavery was a thing. And it was horrible. I fully acknowledge that all of these things are done. All of these sins have been abolished. And people have to stop blaming me for what my great ancestors did. This stuff has to stop. It doesn't lead anywhere. It doesn't get you anywhere. It doesn't gain anything. Horrible things happened. We fixed it, thank God. Now let's move on. Now let's make it better. Now let's rise above it. You keep burying yourself back in it when you have every opportunity in this country to rise above it and do whatever you want to do.
So my opening question to you would be, why is that a destructive thing? Why is that a bad thing when for a long time in this country, I feel personally that white men have had an advantage over some communities that have been discriminated against. So why would you say that that is a destructive thing and not, making up for lost time?
Sure. So let me explain what I mean by diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the basic theory of diversity, equity, and inclusion is spelled out by people like Richard Delgado, who's sort of one of the founders of, for example, critical race theory, is that essentially disparities equal discrimination. That if you see any disparity between one group in the United States and another group in the United States, that is the result of some exterior discrimination. It is not the result of individuals within that group acting differently. It's not the result of cultural differences. It's not the result of aggregated differences within individuals within that group. And that to me is a failure of logic. It also is destructive in that it separates group from group, particularly in the United States, on the basis of race, which is not the best way of actually bringing Americans together or forming policy that is the best for all Americans.
Do you think there's room for nuance, perhaps, though? Like, yeah, maybe not everybody, but there certainly has been a large sect of people that has had it harder because of the color of their skin or their sexuality or their gender identity. Could you acknowledge that maybe there's, a middle ground there where it's not all, but there is some people who certainly have had a disadvantage?
I will say that history has consequences, obviously, and that if you are talking about historic marginalization of particular groups, that has consequences. The problem is that when you design policy in order to rectify for cosmic injustices or historic injustices, you actually have to try and measure out whether underperformance, say economically, is due to those historic injustices. If so, how much? What is the corrective policy that is actually aimed at achieving best opportunity for all? The diversity, equity, and inclusion policies that are directed at separating race from race and then benefiting one race, for example, at the expense of another, ignore the fact that there are individuals within those groups, that history does not fall on everybody equivalent, that frankly, genetics and intelligence don't necessarily fall on an individual level, right? You and I, we don't look the same. We might have different heights. We might have different qualities. That is just the way that God or nature has bestowed skill sets on everybody. What exactly is the government supposed to correct for? And if you took this entire group and you separated it in half, just draw a line anywhere. It's a circle, right? Anywhere you draw a line, you're going to get disparities between the two groups on either side of the line without regard to race, without regard to sex, and without regard to, for example, sexual orientation.
But does that mean
I want you guys to notice something that I thought was very interesting. I don't know if anybody else even picked up on it, but you'll notice when they're all running to the chair, which is another thing about this debate style that I think is just ridiculous. But when a black woman shows any inclination to get up and move to that chair, everybody stops. Everybody moves aside. Everybody's polite. Everybody lets her have the seat, right? Number one, that's pandering. If they believe in equity, why are they acting differently around the black woman? But even more telling is that in this one, the man who is dressing up like a woman, he gets treated just like every other guy. It's a mosh pit running to that stupid chair, right? It's almost as if these wokesters don't really believe he's a woman either. It's kind of odd. Now, as to his point, you don't need DEI policies. The laws have already been created. The Civil Rights Act established that people cannot base decisions on race or sex. That's already a law. It's already done. You don't need quotas to make it legal or illegal because it already is. Now, I don't care what you think your gender identity is, and that shouldn't factor into anyone's decision making. But that's my opinion.
So you believe that certain economic disparities between racial groups are caused as a result of cultural differences?
Sure.
And so what is the backing on this? What would you say contributes to your belief in that?
Okay, so not all cultures, for example, value studying in school the same. You can check this by the amount of hours that kids of particular cultures study. So, for example, Korean Americans study a lot more than, for example, Latino Americans in terms of the number of hours that kids study. It would be hard to suggest what to attribute that to other than sort of parental guidance and what exactly the priorities are of the parents. This is true, by the way, between white people. Okay, so when I talk about disparities between groups, you can talk about white Appalachia, and there are very different values with regard to studying than there are for, say, upper-class white Americans who are living in Brooklyn, right? That's not the exact same thing. So cultural differences are not just racial differences. I think that anybody who attempts to sort of clumsily map that on and pretend that that's all the same, that's obviously not true. But cultural differences do explain an enormous amount of group disparities across incomes. To take a perfect example, if you look at single motherhood rates, they're not equivalent across groups. Those are going to have massive differences with regard to outcomes for children. So if you're talking about cultural differences, again, cultural is just it was a rough way of saying how people act within a group on a large scale. And that is going to amount to some generalization, but that generalization is going to tend to relate very highly with outcome.
But culture is acclimated over time. It becomes a thing over time. And so do you not think that these historical disadvantages that certain ethnic groups have been through over time has created this culture where in which they're unable to put themselves ahead?
Why are some of these people shaking their heads no? Have they been living in their woke bubbles and their echo chambers and wringing their hands for so long that they actually think cultural differences and familial differences don't play a role in this? Now, I grew up poor, and going to college was never really reinforced for me growing up. Just basically getting my high school diploma. Guess what? I did enough to graduate high school, and I didn't go to college till I was 36 years old. Now, I hold myself accountable for the choices that I made, and I'm fine with them, but it's stupid to think my upbringing didn't play a part in it. The one thing I did not do, however, was blame the introduction of DEI in schools and the workforce, because I can't fix that. I can fix my situation through my own actions. I didn't blame the government. I didn't blame anybody else. I held myself accountable. Now, the only way to recover from these historical injustices is to accept that they are historical. Today, you have nothing systemic holding you back, and you can achieve anything that you set your mind to. That's how you get above this.
So your basis is saying that culturally, people don't have the same advantages, right?
I'm saying that not every culture sort of initiates the same action within groups.
So in part, you're saying that you're part of each culture. You know what goes on in each culture to say these things.
No, I'm saying that I can analyze the activities of a particular group with reference to their actual behavior.
So if you go into my culture, we're told that we can achieve anything through hard work. We have to work 10 times harder. But you're not part of our culture, so you're explaining something that doesn't have to do with you. But in turn, you're saying that that culture, unfortunately, does not value the same thing that the next culture does.
So revealed preference tends to be a better way of doing social science than subjective perception. So revealed preference is how people act in the world. So for example, if you have one group of people who say, we really, really value our kids studying, and then their kids don't study at all, that would be a revealed preference.
Okay.
Everybody has
so
has
then
a
when you
reason
have
to say their
people
kids study.
who say in corporate America, you have people who value nepotism versus actual studying hard. What is that called then?
Okay, so the idea that people generally value nepotism over studying hard, I'd like to see the evidence of that, given the fact the vast majority of wealth in this country is not created through nepotism or through inherited wealth.
But Donald Trump was given nepotism, was he not?
I mean, he's one example among a bajillion people who are very, very wealthy in this country. I'm very wealthy now. I certainly wasn't born very wealthy.
But then you can't speak on Donald Trump's experience, can you not?
That just happens to be the case. Okay, I mean, you can laugh at my particular history, but I grew up in an 1,100 square foot home in Burbank, California, with 4 siblings in 1 bedroom.
In Burbank, hold on. In Burbank, I'm sorry, but in Burbank versus growing up in South Central, being told that you have to excel 10 times harder than the next person, but then you're not part of the culture, to say that you can actually come to these disparities is kind of far-sighted.
The idea that you have to work 10 times harder coming from South Central based on, for example, test score is obviously not true. We've had affirmative action programs in this country for solidly 40 years.
But now affirmative action is gone. It's out the door.
Thank
now
God, it was a bad
DEI
program.
is present. DEI is actually saying that we need to have diversity, equity, inclusion. So you're actually putting a footing in the door for different races, different genders, different women, different men, everything. So now you're saying that because this program is gone, this one isn't.
He got saved by the peanut gallery on this one. Ben would have destroyed his arguments in about 10 seconds and made him look extremely foolish. So he should be thankful they voted him out on it. Look, if you want to get ahead, you better accept you're going to have to work 10 times harder than the next person. I know this new generation feels entitled to everything, but the world does not work that way. And you better wake up. If you want to get ahead, you have to outcompete the next person. Now, at least that's how it used to be. Now you only have to check the boxes necessary to fill the quota, and you might get ahead. But even then, you're still going to have to work 10 times harder than the other person who can check those same boxes. So to sum up, it is racist and sexist to say you need a DEI policy to ensure equality for a job. That would assume that a different sex or a different race wouldn't statistically be just as capable, just as well suited for a position based on their own merits. Equity will never be achieved. Okay? Equality of outcome is impossible and it will never be done. Just move on from this crazy theory of equity. Just think about it. If you give me 5 pieces of wood and 20 nails, and you give my next door neighbor the exact same materials, we're going to do completely different things with it. Equity is not achievable, and it shouldn't be. We wouldn't want everybody to be exactly the same. What kind of fun would that be? That's it for this one. Like I said, if there's interest, I'll move on to some of the other topics. God bless, and we'll see you for the next one.